reveal your heart to me. You have nothing stirring within you, not even a hint of reason. For the one who will shape the world, this cannot be. Go forth and discover yourself. What will be the legacy of your existence?
Do not be afraid. My little master has taken an interest in you. Pitiful human though you are, he wishes to grant you a gift. It is vital that you receive it, and I'm afraid you have no choice. Please try not to struggle. It will only hurt for an instant. Enjoy your last moments as a human. Magatama is the essence of demonic power. With it, you have joined the ranks of demons. My little master is always watching, so please try not to bore him.
As we awaken now a new self, welcome to part 2 of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, where today we're actually going to get into the real gameplay of the game. We're still going to have a few story beats because you're still in the prologue, so to speak, of the game introducing everything, but now we have access to the menu, we have access to Magatamas, which I'll be explaining as we go. We have the gameplay loop that's going to start opening up to us so you get a firmer understanding of what Nocturne entails. And I will do my best throughout the course of this to explain everything. The biggest thing that's going to be an explanation and a half is explaining the press turn systems, which I'll start doing when we actually get into a fight, because it sounds simple enough on the surface, but there's so many layers to it. Especially if you're someone who's only familiar with Persona, going to this, that will catch you off guard and will make it seem really against you and really unfair up until you get a better understanding of it, and then you'll realize that it's one of the most interesting things about this game and how it handles its balance. But now to be introduced to how you'll be saving in this game.
Who's there? Wait, aren't you that kid I met at the park? What in God's name happened to you? I see. Well, at least you still think like a human. That aside, you know what the hell's going on here? Last thing I remember, I was blinded by a bright light. After that, I was in this room. From the look of it, we're in some sort of hospital. Seeing as you're here too, I take it this is Shinjuku Medical Center? Well, first things first, as much as I want to know what's going on out there, it's not exactly safe to walk around. Have you come across any of them yet? Well, they're definitely not human. My guess is that they're demons. My strange experience, your new look, And these weird creatures. Something tells me calling the cops won't do us any good. But damn, if my hunch is right, there's an actual explanation for all this. Though I'd rather not believe it. If this is Shinjuku Medical Center, I can't just rule it out. The conception may have occurred for real. You know, I've seen a barrel like this before. If I remember right, it belonged to a man named Hikawa. He's gotta be behind this somehow. Just standing here talking won't do us any good. Listen, if you're strong enough to fight, could you gather some information while you're at it? I tried talking to what looked like a ghost, but I didn't have much luck. What's happened to the world? And is there anyone else out there? We can only find the answers by finding other people. I wish I could do it myself, but I doubt I'd last long against a demon. Besides, I imagine studying this thing has its own merits. So for now, I'll leave it to you.
To start explaining what actually happened at the end of last part, we experienced something known as the Conception. The Conception is the end and then rebuilding of the entire world. What I mean is, the world bent outward and then inward and inverted on itself and ended all life. The only living beings are the beings that were present in the medical center we are in right now. So any character that you know is in this medical center is still alive. Anyone outside of its walls, no, they're gone. And the significance of this, as the Shining Star spoke to us at the start of this video, is that a new world has to be forged in its place. The Conception is the breakdown of the old to welcome in a new era, a new world. But the only person who can welcome that new era is someone with reason. Reason is a confirmed, locked-in ideology of how you feel the world should be led and the world should be focused on. Whether it should be isolationism, dictatorship, whatever. It's how you feel the world should be run. If you have that feeling, you have reason, and so you can be worthy of leading the new world. Because we are half human, half demon now, because of the whole demi-fiend side of it, we are not allowed our own reason. And I'll explain what that means in a second.
Come. Show me the strength of a demon.
Now as we start working through this tutorial area, because we don't get to pick our own reason, we instead get access to listen to and be a part of other people's reasons, and that becomes the entire baseline of this entire game. Whose ideologies do you agree with and disagree with? And it will lead to one of quite a fair number of endings, and all of them are very unique and well justified. But I'm going to put that to one side for a second, because now we've got our very first introduction to combat, and I can start explaining the basics. It is a turn-based JRPG with strength, defenses, magic attack, magic defense, etc. If you've played Persona, you'll know some of this. If you use an advanced skill that's physical, you'll spend health to use it. If you use an advanced skill that's magical, you'll spend magic points, not soul points. That was a slip up on my end from the last video. You'll spend magic points to use them. But there are also skills that will like boost substats. Like there will be a skill that will boost attack, or boost defense, or boost hit and evasion. And they work very different from how they do in Persona. When you level up, you pick what stat goes up, but you get 1 point, so spend it wisely. For me personally, I tend to, and I got very lucky here, playing in my favor, I tend to focus on strength. I tend to go all in on strength, get it to around 25 if I can help it, which if you played Nocturne, you know that's pretty high because your cap is 40. They don't inflate any of the numbers, your cap is 40, so once you get it to 25, you're so close to having it at max. It's like having it at like 75%. And we've just seen it go, well, no, minute, like you said 25. Like, there's a Magatama, which I'll explain as well. This is why I'm glad this video is a longer one, because there's a lot I need to explain to you guys. There's a Magatama later on that boosts all stats by 10. So your target is always to only ever get to 30 with something, because if you're going for 100%, you're picking up that Magatama. And the fact that it adds 10 to every stat means you can spare level ups to put into other things instead of trying to push strength all the way to 40 just to get the plus 10 and realize it caps at 40 anyway. But as we persevere, if you decide to deliberately go the wrong way, you get an extra fight here. If you're playing on hard mode, there's a chance this fight will kill you. This is something I want to talk about. Nocturne is infamous for how extremely difficult it is. Throughout the course of this, I'll be playing on normal. I won't be playing on the new DLC mode, Merciful. Not just because I beat the game on normal, so I feel like, no, I can do it, so show it, but because Merciful straight up deactivates certain mechanics of the game to make it easier, and I'm not about that personally. I'm all about making the game more accessible, but straight up deactivating shit in the game just seems like, well, no, it's like you're treating them like idiots. People who just want to play it on easy. So I was like, no, I'm sticking with normal anyway. I haven't even installed Merciful. I watched a lot of footage and breakdown stuff on it, and I was like, yeah, I wanted to get a firm understanding of it so I could talk to you guys about it and talk about whether it's worth trying Merciful if you're struggling or whatever. And to be honest, no. I honestly believe you will lose a large chunk of what makes Nocturne so special if you play on Merciful because of how much they take away. Which is so baffling. Like, if they just toned it down, it'd be fine. But no, they straight up get rid of shit, and it's like, okay. But if you go the wrong way, you get a Miragi rock. Argy is fire, Bufu is ice, Zeo is electricity, and if you're expecting me to say Garo is wind, you are mistaken. Garo is not in this game, that is Persona. In Shin Megami Tensei, we instead have Zan, which is force. Which essentially is the same thing. Like, it'll go Zan, Zanma, Zandyne, in the same way that, like, the stage 2 of fire is Argileo, and then Argidyne for stage 3, Bufala, Bufudyne, Zeonga, Zeodyne.
So, you made it. Your strength is outstanding. We shall meet again soon.
And throughout the course of the game, now we've had our interesting little encounter with the old man and lady, is that there is a balance of certain enemies will respond to those 4 core elements in different ways. And so you'll have to have a party that maybe has Argy, or has Bufu, has Zan, has Zeo, to react to enemy weaknesses as you go on. Which you want to do, because now I've got a decent chunk of time, I want to explain to you press turns. If you're used to Persona, you'll be used to the idea that if you hit an enemy's weakness, you get something called a once more, where it will give you an extra turn, but it will knock the opponent down, so you can't get a once more off them twice. It's only if it knocks them down, you will get it. In Shin Megami Tensei, they have something kind of similar, but instead, every time you start a fight, you have as many turn tokens, that's the best way to explain it, as members of party you have. So if you have a full party of 4, when your turn starts, you have 4 tokens. If you hit an enemy's weakness or land a critical hit, you will only spend half a token instead of the full token, and you'll spot it because in the top right corner, you'll see the 4 tokens and one of them will start glowing to tell you you've only spent half of it instead of the whole thing. So if you constantly hit enemies' weaknesses, you will get double the amount of turns you would have got normally. So you can get up to 8 turns if you have a full party of 4, up to 6 with 3, up to 4 with 2, and you can still get 2 turns if it's just you on your own if you get a crit or a weakness. So it's always worth going for. The enemies obey this exact same rule as well, with the exception of bosses, where bosses by default will usually have 2 turn tokens or press turns instead of 1, just so then they get to go more often. Because, you know, it's the boss fight should be more of a challenge. But every enemy in the game will work on the same rules. If there's 5 enemies, they will start their turn with 5 attacks, which can be brutal if they all land crits or whatever, and it's part of the reason why SMT starts to become very difficult. If you get unlucky and things like that, it can really start ripping you apart. But that's not all. It's not all giving, there is taking away as well. If an enemy dodges or blocks the attack, it will spend double the tokens. So if you have same situation, you have a full team of 4, your first attack misses, it will spend an extra token, you only have 2 left. You spent the one for taking the action, but it took another one because it missed, or it was blocked. Same applies to the enemy. And so you can use this, say a boss fight's giving you a lot of trouble because they keep on going twice, lower their hit and evasion, up yours. If they miss their first attack, they'll lose their second turn, so they only get to go once per turn. You can lock them out like that, so there's a strategy. But it gets even more brutal. If you attack an enemy, and it is either drained or reflected, it will take every single press turn, no matter what. So if same situation, you have a full team of 4 press tokens, 4 press turns, your first attack is drained, you've just lost your turn, it's the enemy's attack now. End of. Once again, though, same applies to the enemy. If you can force them to make an attack reflect or drain, like say their only physical attack is a group wide, so you have someone drain or reflect physical in your party, you can lock them out of having turned straight up. So there is a dynamic with it. When you first start it and are first adjusting, it will feel very rigged against you because the enemy will constantly be gaining press turns, and in some encounters there'll be like 5 if not 6 enemies in one go. And so there'll be 6 turns coming your way. You're going to see me cut around a little bit because, admittedly, there's a trophy for completing the map of a single dungeon. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and make it so I just max out the medical center while I'm here. So you're going to see me, like, run off the edges like this just to fill in the auto map. But you want to go to the Annex Pass here and talk to the Pixie. Oh, I've never seen a demon quite like you. Hey, are you looking for something? Kinda, yeah. Hey, about that thing you're looking for. I'll help you if you want. In fact, I'll even be your demon ally. You want to know what I'm looking for? A demon who can take me to your yogi park. You look kind of flabby and weak, but I'll let that slide. What do you say? Should we join up? Kinda, yeah. Alright then, let's get out of here. If we have the pass thingy, we can get through that door to the annex. I saw some press test catting it. Or Praytest, however you pronounce that. I'm Pixie the Fairy, I'm sure we'll be the best of friends. Pixie joined your party. As I was saying, that is press turn, so you have a good understanding of it. Secondly, if you're used to Persona, I alluded to this last part, you might have been forgiven for thinking the people we met would be your future party members. That is not how it works. You are the only party member in a Shin Megami Tensei game. I say that 4 and 4 Apocalypse kind of break the rules slightly, but only slightly, because they're more like add-ons, not actual characters. But, instead, your demons you recruit, like, well, Personas you play Persona, are your party members. You are your own person, you don't rely on a Persona for skills. Instead, your demons are your allies, so you still want to fuse them up and make them as good as possible. You just need to be wary that they are your team and not just your extra power. But once you've got Pixie, come over to this locked door where the Praetors were singing and dancing about it. The key's in here, and Pixie will do an impression to squeeze in to convince them to unlock the door. Then when you go in, you get a scripted encounter where you get to fight these guys. Magatsuhi! And you're going to hear a lot of enemies talk about Magatsuhi throughout this game. Magatsuhi is like... it's kind of like the blood and soul of the planet. But that's putting it very mildly. Like, the game will explain in a lot more detail as we go through it, but that's the easiest way of explaining it so you understand on the base level. Most demons feed on it and are always allured by its scent. And in certain areas of the game, you'll even be able to see it. There's a part coming up later on where we'll go through a dungeon where you can see it running across the floor. Magatsuhi. Ow. Pixie is a great starting demon, by the way, and I'm going to make a point of saying this now, and I will mention it again later, because there's a point where Pixie will try and leave the party, and under no circumstances can you let her. And when you get her to Yoyogi Park, because like I said, what she wants is to go to Yoyogi Park. When you get there, she'll say, oh, I can go now, but if you encourage her to stick around, it's worth it. It's really goddamn worth it to convince her to stick around. Ultimately, at the very opposite end of the game, there is an optional door you can unlock that will only unlock if you still have the most loyal companion with you. It means Pixie. If you still have Pixie in your party, you never completely got rid of her, you can open that door and access something really damn cool. So when you're going to see through it, like, I'm going to let Pixie become High Pixie, and I'm going to keep Pixie around. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, there are demon evolutions in this game, sort of not too dissimilar to Pokemon, I suppose. When you reach certain levels, demons can evolve and become stronger demons and unlock new skills. In some games, like 4 Apocalypse is a good example of this. Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse, if you get Angel on your team, Angel will evolve 8 goddamn times, to such an extent you can actually keep Angel throughout the entire game as a demon if you so choose. It's not really recommended because you can get more out of it by, fusing and whatnot, but the fact is that you can do that because Angel evolves 8 goddamn times. It actually evolves full circle back to Angel in a different costume, because there's actually 2 variants of Angel. There's Angel, that is the one that you're probably used to in Persona, where they're in like the black garments and it's all chained up. And then there's an Angel where they're borderline naked and they've got their hair covering their chest. And the one that's borderline naked is actually the original Angel, and the one with all like the black clothing is the much stronger one you get at the end of the evolutionary line. But once you get through the annex bit, we're in the main meat of the dungeon, and you'll actually be able to see the first boss of the game minding its own business, swimming around in the main dome. You can see it, there he is. That's Fornius, that's your first boss. See, that's Dimmy swimming around like your own place, that's Fornius. As long as he's around, you might as well kiss any hopes of leaving this hospital alive goodbye. He's blocking the only exit out of this place, so we need to get through him. So now you know what our first boss is going to be. Additionally, this demon here is the closest thing to an explanation on press turns you're going to get. Because it's going to say, do you want a good fortune or a dark fortune? If you say bright future, sorry, it will say, well, hit enemy weaknesses and get crits and you'll get good fortune, telling you you'll get extra press turns. But if you say dark future, it will say, well, keep missing getting blocks reflected and drained, because then you have a bad future. Continue to use useless attacks. Let your attacks be nullified, reflected, or drained. See? No dark future full of defending shall await you. It will say you'll constantly be the enemy's turn. Right, on to the next topic of significance. And this will come up a lot more later. But and I'm going to do this a lot, and you probably already know it, so I'm going to do this a lot, just because it's easier to do it, because I know a lot more people have played Persona than Shin Megami Tensei. In Persona, there are skills that will boost your attack, boost your defense, and boost your magic, and there are skills that will lower the enemy's attack, defense, and magic. And these skills, they're nice in Persona as like a little extra add-on to help turn the tide. They're a goddamn necessity in Shin Megami Tensei, and the reason is they don't do Personas, they only last for 3 turns. They last until they're challenged. Like, if you lower the hit and evasion, and then they either use Dekunda, which gets rid of all nerfs, or buff their hit and evasion afterwards to nullify it, that will get rid of it. But if you do it and they don't have any way of getting rid of it, that will stay the rest of the fight. And that will make and break it in one sense, but in the second sense, in Persona, you can only do it once. If you do it a second time, in the older games it will do nothing, in the newer games it will just extend its length of how many turns it will last. In Nocturne, you can stack them. You can stack them up to 4 times. So if you boost your hit and evasion 4 times and then reduce your opponent's hit and evasion 4 times, you'll probably hit every attack and they'll probably miss every attack. And with the previous mentioned press turn system, suddenly that is extremely significant, and bosses will be using that. There's a boss that's very infamous in this game for being a big brick wall, and it's kind of early on, that's called the Matador, and I will explain the Matador and how to deal with it when we get to it. But Matador starts the fight by using a skill that boosts its hit and evasion 4 times, maxing it out, making it so almost all of your attacks will guarantee miss, and it will never goddamn miss. So you're spending the whole fight trying to weaken that down and challenge it to stop it doing so. And when you consider it also goes twice and has access to magic, that fight can become a nightmare very quickly. But next thing is that how you get more demons. It's through negotiations. Negotiations don't do all the detailed discussion that Persona 1, 2, and 5 does. It's a lot more down to earth and consistent to an extent. There's a couple moments where the game kind of says, screw you. But essentially, enemies will either ask you a question or ask for items. The more you agree and help them, the more on board they'll be with joining your party. Like right now, we've just got Kodama to join. But there are certain enemies that... and you have to pay attention to what type of demon they are. There are certain types of demons that will either deliberately be more awkward or will expect different things from you. And there are some demons that straight up can't speak your language, and so you'll have to have other demons convince them. Certain demons can learn certain skills, like Seduce, for example, which is if the enemy is of a same type, aka, say, a fairy, since Pixie's a fairy, so it's a good example, and there's another enemy you encounter later on that's also a fairy, you can use Seduce to help turn the tide. But then there are things like Kinship, which is the same thing, where Kinship is if you try and talk to a demon and they start to get a little nasty or starts to go wrong or they're just not playing ball, an enemy that has, like a teammate that has Kinship will convince them to calm down if they're of the same type. So you can still try and talk to them and go for more. But it's worth mentioning that there's always a slight risk with all conversations. If it goes well, they will join you unless you're underleveled. If you're underleveled, they will either give you money money, an item, or will heal you and then will just leave. They will end neutrally, where they'll just stop talking to you and it will take that press turn, and that's it. Or they will end with them angry at you. If they end with them angry at you, you might as well have whacked them when they reflected or something, because it could guarantee end your turn and immediately go to theirs. You will use all of your press tokens, so you have to be wary not to piss them off. Additionally, if you're going to try and converse with a demon, try and make a point of singling them out. Like, deal with every other enemy so they're the only one left. Because there's two benefits to that. Firstly is the obvious, if it goes wrong and it angers them, there's only one turn coming your way and not several. And secondly, other enemies can spot you trying to converse and have a chance of intervening. And if they intervene, they will end the conversation on the neutral term, so it will just take a turn from you. So that's something that you will just have to deal with. So, to make it so it's easier to deal with, get rid of them. Make it so you don't have to worry about a chance of them stepping in. Make it so it's the only one left. But be wary that if you hurt the enemy you're trying to converse, like you whack them first, the conversation will be harder to stew because they'll be wary of you. And it's the same deal if you kill a comrade. Like, if there's two of the same enemy, they'll be considered comrades. If you kill one of them and then talk to the other, there's a chance the other one will still be wary of you because you killed the comrade. Like, there's a lot of stuff under the table here, but as you press on and go into this basement will actually loop around back to where we started this part, so you can get access to that save point and the free heal that was around the corner from it. The free heal is more significant because this dungeon is one of extremely few instances where you can get heals for free. Once you leave this dungeon, which is the tutorial, we'll be introduced to something called the Spring of Life, which will be your main source of getting any healing. As in, like, getting your SP and MP, sorry, I keep going to say SP. MP and HP healing in one go. But it costs. It doesn't cost much, but it does cost. And so you will have to be wary. It's like using an inn in Final Fantasy, where it doesn't cost much, but there's always a cost to it, and depending on where you are and how significant it is, can affect how much that price is. But to give an example, every time we finish a fight, you see we get EXP and then we get a symbol. That kanji is maka, which is just demon currency, and it's the main currency of the game. You don't use yen like in Persona, you use maka, and that's how much it'll be. But maka, like, for example, to heal like 100 MP, it'll be like 40 maka, and we got 61 from that one fight. Like, maka is never really that much of a hassle unless you've just done a lot of shopping and then go, oh right, I should use the Spring of Life. Like, always go to the Spring of Life first. But that's something I won't even really have to tell you as you go through this game, because you'll discover for yourself this game is extremely difficult. Fairly difficult. Like, I don't think, outside of Nocturne moments, or SMT moments,
First things first.
this game for the most part is pretty well balanced. It has the odd moment where you sit there and go, hang on, what? But for the most part, it is what it is. You're also going to see me skip the odd encounter, because down here in the basement, it's mostly the starting enemies. And so we can't really do anything with them. They won't talk to us yet because we don't have, like, any of the right skills to do so. So it's something that I've done with every JRPG I've ever recorded. If it's a fight that has no significance and we've done it before, I will skip it. But there are more fights that I consider of significance, even though there are returning enemies, than not in this game, because of how all over the place certain fights can lead, especially later in the game when you have a firmer understanding of all the mechanics. And the game expects you to have a firmer understanding of all the mechanics. Additionally, I talked about this last part, but now I can talk about it in greater detail. You see how that compass is flashing red? It means we're on the verge of the next random encounter. It will go yellow, orange, then red to show you how close you are to the next random encounter. But as I mentioned before, there are certain instances where standing in certain spots or interacting with certain things will immediately enforce a random encounter. Oh, that's an instance there. That enemy reflected that, so my turn completely just ended. So now we know, don't use Zan attacks. These guys are very handy to try and get a hold of. Try and get one before the boss. Because you can see when we do, like, when we analyze them, they have Kunda spells. They have spells that can reduce stats of the enemy. So it's very helpful if you're struggling with the first boss, nab one of these guys. Go out of your way to get it, level it up like once or twice, and you'll be good to go. Additionally, leveling up Pixie wouldn't go amiss either, because she will learn the ability to, I think it's lower defense. I can't remember if it's lower attack or lower defense, but I think it's lower defense, and if you can get that, that can make it a lot more easier as well. Do you expect me to join you? Ha ha ha! I'll listen to you for 1 life stone. Okay. Still not enough. 70 marker. Okay. Very well. In the tutorial, expect most of your conversations to go kind of well. It's very rare for a conversation to go wrong in this prologue space whilst you're in the medical center. But don't think it's always going to be like that. So once we leave and the real game begins, the game will be a little less kind. And they'll expect you to work a little harder sometimes. Sometimes they won't just ask for stuff. Sometimes they'll ask you questions, and if you answer it a weird way, they'll respond weirdly. But we're actually at the end of the medical center now. In front of us, the door right in front of us, will actually lead us to the boss fight. So I realized I missed a path and backtracked and cut to here. Back in the basement, just before we went back up the last stairs, there's a turn-off point that I just ran past and missed. But I knew was there and was actively looking for it, which makes it a little more frustrating that I missed it, because I was actively looking. But you want to do it because you get chakra drops in here, and chakra drops are MP restorings. Or chakra drops. But there are also other ways of making the demons negotiable. It's not just trying to talk to them. Some enemies can become fearful of you if you get them super weak or make them the only one left alive. If they become fearful, they might just run up to you and say, please let me join the party, or please let me do this, or please let me do that. And so you can get enemies that normally you can't converse with to join your side because you pushed them into a corner, so they didn't have a choice, kind of thing. That was an interesting encounter scenario. And now we can talk about status conditions, because in the last fight, an enemy got stunned, or shocked even. There are many status conditions in this game, but there are also ones that are kind of like soft status conditions, which only last until it's your turn again. So like say there's frozen and then there's like shocked. If you hit an enemy with an electric attack, there's always a small chance they'll become shocked. If they become shocked, any physical attack that hits them afterwards is a guaranteed critical. If they're frozen, it's the exact same deal, but if you use Bufu or ice skills instead. And so keeping an eye out for that, because if it happens to you and a character like starts glowing blue or starts like zigging and zagging left and right like they're zapped, any physical attack going their way is going to crit. And critical hits, with how dangerous this game can be and the fact it gives them an extra turn, can be extremely hazardous. Up here we'll get you a Mabufu rock and a Mazio rock, which is just level 1 Zeo and level 1 ice, but across the board. If a skill has Ma in front of it, it means it's multi. So like, Miragi is Agi but to everyone, Mabufu is to everyone, etc, etc. On my way back, I encountered a Hupao, or Hupo, or however you pronounce this thing, which is that enemy in the middle there. The enemy's nice to have, but don't under any circumstance take that thing with you into the boss, because it's weak to ice and the boss has ice skills. Oh, you actually get a good example if you're paying attention to the press turns there of what I meant. It got a weakness, it got 2, but then the very next one missed, so it took double. And so it lost turns as a consequence. I missed there, so I lost a turn. I've got to be very wary now, because if that thing happened to use Agi on Kodama again, or Miragi here, that could have killed. If the random number generation was slightly higher, Kodama would have been dead. And it's the same in most JRPGs under the sun. There is a random number damage calculator, or RNG, but for damage calculation. And it essentially means like once it works out your attack and works out your enemy's defense, and when you do the attack, say it does 30 damage. 30 is just part of the average, not the locked number. Like if you do it again, it won't necessarily do 30 damage. It's just there's a chance it will do 30. It could do 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. That sort of idea. It could do in its roundness of it. It could do it in its average. Well, it's Huapo, not Hupao. Huapo can be a little bit more awkward. Like I did a practice bit. Like, I didn't do too much. I just practiced a little ahead before I started recording, and Huapo refused to join me effectively. Like because it kept on being wary of me because it always comes in pairs, and I always deal with one. But Huapo is very nice to have because it's got fire skills and it's your first access to Agi. But because it is weak to ice and cannot disrecommend it enough, keep it with you, but do not put it in your party until after the first boss fight. Because Fornius will just exploit that. Fornius will just boo through it for extra turns and then use it to attack the whole party. Especially on hard mode. The AI of this game can be surprisingly devastating. Especially when you consider how old this game is. The AI can really go out of its way to just pinpoint and target and pick up on strategies. If it realizes you've got a weakness it can exploit, it will exploit it. And on hard mode, it will take it an extra step and drastically exploit it to use it as an opportunity to give itself more gung-ho. Like there's a skill called Focus, which doubles the damage of the next attack. It will hit a weakness to get an extra turn, then spend that extra turn using Focus, so basically no turns wasted. And then from there, then just hit you again. So in the span of one turn, it's hit you with stuff you're really gonna feel like it shouldn't have. Which is what I was kind of alluding to when I said about Nocturne moments. There are moments in this game where things just happen and they feel really unfortunate. Where things you'll just be really unlucky. Where like you'll start a fight and the enemy goes first and they all land a crit on you and you die. And you're like, oh, come on. And it's just unfortunate. But it can happen. But that being said, it's time for the first boss as we are introduced to Fornius.
Hey, punk! I've never seen you around, and I don't like your face! You trying to get by without paying respect to me? The almighty Fornius? You want to die, don't you? I screwed up and let another human escape a while ago, but not this time. I have a habit of butchering anyone who disrespects me. I cut him up with these fins. Time to die!
I love the voice they gave Fornius. They make him just sound like a dumb brute, which is kind of fitting, but this is the first boss of the game. This is Fornius. Fornius really isn't too bad because the game knows you're very limited in what you have access to right now. So it's not going to start expecting too much. However, it is going to expect you to pay attention to strengths and weaknesses. This thing has a weakness to Zeo-based attacks, so try to make the most of it whenever you can. If you can if you get lucky, you can shock this thing, which I talked about earlier, making any physical attack beyond that point a crit. And because so far every level I've put on Demi-Fiend's strength, the physical damage is going to be just that little bit higher than what's likely to be had if you've been trying to space it out a little more. Because on your first run, it's the same with every SMT game. When it's your very first run of an SMT, you don't know what to expect, you don't know what's king, you don't know what works, what doesn't. So you're going to be kind of balanced out until you get a feel of it. While on your second run, you know what works and what doesn't. In SMT4, if that game ever gets like a remaster on consoles and I record it, you're going to see me put almost everything into magic every chance I get, because magic is extremely powerful in SMT4. But in SMT3, physical attacks kind of rule the roost. But as we see here, this enemy is now shocked, so any attack that comes its way is now a crit. So I just push all in on it, get a lunge, and I get 57 damage, which is great. Which really puts this thing into a weak position and does loads of damage to it. So you are expected to still pay attention to things like this. But Icy Death has a chance to hit the whole party, but it has a low accuracy. So as you saw there, because one missed, it lost a turn. Press turns will always prioritize what you do wrong over what you do right on group-wide attacks. What I mean is, if you use a group-wide attack, one enemy's hit by it is weak to it, but the other enemy dodges it, it will prioritize the dodge over the weakness. As in, it will make it so you miss a turn. It won't make it so you only spend half for it won't make it so you won't only spend half for getting the weakness. It will entirely just prioritize you miss, so you're losing a turn, and it will also apply to the enemy. It will always prioritize negatives over positives. It's the same deal if there's like 5 enemies, 4 of them you hit a weakness in the group attack, but the last one reflects it, it will only care about the reflect, you'll lose your turn. By beating this boss, you get Magatama. Before this video ends, Magatamas is how you, the main character, earn skills and deter what your strengths and weaknesses are. So to give an example, we start with the normal one, which gives a 2 boost to strength and vitality, 1 to everything else, and gives you some basic physical skills. But this one we just got will make us null ice attacks, but weak to electric, but will give us ice skills every time we level up. But as you can see, we don't get a strength bonus anymore, but instead we get more points in magic and such. Magatamas are something you're going to be relying on and swapping in between quite often. There'll be a point where one will have a skill you really want, but it will put you in a situation where, say, it will make you weak to fire and you're in a volcanic location. Just to give an example. And so you're not going to want to equip it straight away because it will put you at such a detriment trying to get it. It's not a matter of you get a skill every time you level up. Every single skill has a level requirement, and you'll know if you're near it if when you check the Magatama menu, the symbol you're on is shaking. If it's shaking violently, it means the next level you'll get a skill. If it's shaking only slightly, you're about 2 or 3 levels away. If it's like stone dead and it's just not moving, leave it. Go to a different Magatama because you're wasting resources where you could be getting more skills. You do have a skill limit though. You can only carry so many skills on you, so you're going to be picking and choosing. And later in the game, once you've got your setup built, you're not going to care for those new skills, and you're only going to be equipping Magatama you care about. Like, you're only going to go for the one that's like, oh, I'm in a big ice dungeon. Well, I'm going to equip the one that makes me null ice then. Things like that. You're going to start being very strategic with your Magatamas. Here's another example of something that can happen in a fight. That can be a bit of a Nocturne moment if you're unlucky. Say you've just gone through a really difficult fight. You barely survived the skin of your teeth. There's always a chance more enemies can join the fight. If more enemies join the fight after you win and you're low, that could be extremely dangerous. But it is something that can happen, so you need to be wary of it. And it's something else that can lead to more Nocturne moments, which is just things that can happen, and it's a very low likelihood, but when they happen, you go, God damn it. Once you finish that fight, make sure to backtrack and talk to this soul, because he placed a bet that you would lose the fight. If you win, he gives you all the money in his pocket, which is 750 marker, which in this early stage of the game is brilliant. Go back here and get this free heal as well, because it's the last free heal you're going to get for a little while. Save your game, and on that note, this very long video that I have talked extensively on, I am going to wrap up. Next time on Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, we are going to break out into the open world and start exploring the Vortex world as it is now known. But until then, you guys take care now. Peace.